Today I'm going to show you how to make this really sweet little Northern Lights embroidery. Hi everyone, Sarah from Sarah Homfray Embroidery, and I'm back in the studio because Jonathan and I have been away on our travels. So we have been on board with Olsen Cruise Lines and we have been teaching craft to the guests on board. So we did quite a few different crafts. We made beautiful velvet roses for formal night to wear on formal night. We wove some Nordic landscapes. There's a little one of those up here. We made some magic memory books for memories of their cruise. You could put things in from their cruise. But it was a cruise about the Northern Lights. We went in search of the Northern Lights, which we did in fact see, and they were absolutely spectacular from the deck of the ship right out at sea. Absolutely no light pollution at all. It was wonderful. And one of our projects was to stitch the Northern Lights, and this was by far the most popular project, so we thought we would share it with you because it's a really lovely little design. You can see it from lots of different places at the moment. There's lots of Aurora activity, so you don't have to go to the Arctic Circle to see it. So maybe you have seen it near where you are. So we're going to stitch this little project and I'm going to show you how to do this. Now if you want to use materials from your stash, because it doesn't take many materials, I will tell you what we're using as we go along, but we do have some packs left over from the classes on the ship. We have a limited number of these, but it's got absolutely everything you need in it to complete this project here and to finish it as well. So if you want to get hold of one of these packs, it will be in our shop. I will put the link in the description below this video. You can click on that. There is a limited number. When they're gone, they're gone. So if you want to have a go at this lovely project, do jump on those as soon as you can. So I made this project to fit in a 4-inch hoop. We only had very short classes. We didn't have a lot of time on deck, so it's a really nice little size to do. So you can do it any size. You can make it larger if you want to, and you can have whatever size frame you like. But start with the frame because it's going to need to fit in the frame. So you will need to have a frame before you start stitching. So that's my 4-inch frame. I've got a backing fabric there, and then embroidery fabric is dark. So this is a dark navy blue fabric. You could use a black fabric or any kind of blue. That blue would work as well if you want to. And I've just put a blue one behind, not a white one, just so it doesn't show through the fabric. So you'll need 2 pieces of fabric that fit nicely in your frame with enough around the edge to finish off later. And then I've got 3 layers of fabric. Now the packs do come with these 3 layers of fabrics. They're all different. There's a really nice mix. You will just get whatever gets pulled out of the box when you place your order, but they're all really lovely. You can't make a horrible one with it. It's got really lovely fabrics for my collection in there. But I've used a piece of lace, so I actually used the lace because I thought that would make nice snowy covered mountains. You don't have to use lace, you can just use 3 pieces of fabric if you want to. And then I've got 2 pattern pieces, and they're all a little bit narrower than the one before, but you'll see they're the width of this fabric that I'm using. This one's got little polar bears on it. And then I've just got a patterned one. So I used all pattern pieces because I thought that made a nice effect for the mountains. You could use plain and decorate it with stitching if you want to. And you can see they get shorter. Now what it's important to do is to put your frame over your fabrics and make sure that they're in position so you've got enough space to stitch the lights. So if I just pull that down, I want to make sure my hoop's in the middle. If possible, you could draw around the inside of your hoop if you want to, and then know that everything's got to be placed there. I'll shape these a little bit in a minute, but we need enough sky to be able to stitch the lights. So if I do my mountains too high, I haven't got any room for all these beautiful Northern Lights. So just need to make sure that they come low enough but they still stay in the frame. So I reckon you just play with it just to get those roughly in the right place. We're going to cut these down a little bit, so quite like that. So I'm going to hold those in that position, and then I'm just going to cut them into mountain shapes. So you can see with this one, if I bring this back in here, we've just done very gentle shapes. We had some amazing ones going on in the class. We had little mountain ranges and the little polar bears came in it quite a lot as well. So you can get really creative with this, but if you just want a simple, nice, easy one, just curve the top of it and just make some mountain shapes. It's quite nice if they can go down into a point, and then you can get your lights to disappear off the horizon. Because they did do that, they went right over the ship and down to the edges. I'll just show you that one, which we're going to come back to later as well. So that one is a little bit more contoured, a little bit more mountain, so you can choose how much you do that. So I'm going to cut those into shape now, and I'm just going to test them again on my frame to make sure that they fit. So just made those simple shapes like so, just done that one in an arc there, a little bit of a wiggly one for that. So when I put my hoop back over in the middle of that blue fabric, I've got plenty of room for the light. So just double check that you're doing that, because it would be awful if you did all the stitching and you couldn't fit your lights in, which is the whole point of the embroidery. So I've done that. I'm just going to pin those pieces of fabric together, pin the layers together. So pin everything together right round the top as well. Make sure everything's held together. And I'm just going to tack or baste those all in place. I don't like stitching with the pins in because they stick in your fingers. So it's worth just taking a little bit of extra time just to stitch them together. So just an ordinary sewing cotton that you would use in a sewing machine. Nice big stitches, and just baste and tack that whole thing together. You can take your pins out when you get to it. And then when you get down to your mounting layers, just can go over those as well. You can go along the top here, you can go round here across the top and then around the bottom. Make sure you get it all held together so it doesn't all fall apart. And if your fabric is just off the bottom here, I'm just going to trim that so I've got a nice square piece of fabric that I can work in my embroidery hoop. So now I've got a nice piece of fabric that I can just stitch on without worrying about sticking any pins in my fingers. So I'm going to do some stitching now to stitch across the top of the mountains. Now I've done a really simple stitch on this one. I've just done a running stitch just to hold this fabric down. If you want to go fancier, you can put all sorts of passing by. You can put all sorts of stitches on it if you want to, and decorate your mountains. You can fill your boots with that one, I don't mind, but I'm just going to show you the really basic stitching just to hold this down if you want to do that and get on stitching your lights. So I've actually picked this sort of browny coloured thread. It goes with the fabric in here, although I can't see much of that now. Now I've cut it up, but that was why I chose that thread. So any colour you like. I've got 3 strands of a stranded cotton. You can use a perlé thread, you can use a wool, you can use anything you like with this. Just have a little bit of fun creating. Don't worry about it's got to be this particular kind of thread. And I found it easier to do this in my hand. We'll move to the hoop later, but I just did this in my hand. It was much easier to do. So I'm just going to start my thread in between all of those layers. I've got a knot in the end, so we're really doing a bit of slow stitching. If you follow my channel, you'll know that I like slow stitching. If you don't know what slow stitching is, we've got a whole playlist on what that is and why you should be doing it, because it's brilliant. So I'm just going to go along the top of the mountains. I'm not worrying about turning edges in or finishing edges off neatly. I've just cut it neatly and I'm just going to stitch along the top. If you want to turn it in, if you like that, you can do that. If you want to stitch over the edge, you can do that too. But I'm just going to do this running stitch along just inside that edge like so, in the 3 strands of stranded that I'm using, just to fasten it all together. And that's the only stitch I'm doing for this bit. As I said, you can embellish as you like. You could put beads on it, you could all sorts of exciting things to make your landscape. So I've just come along there. So I'm going right from one side to the other. So you won't see the very end bit, but we're going to wrap that around the back afterwards to finish it off. So just go right to your edges. Then I'll come along and go over the top of this as well. I can change colour if I want. Then I'm also going to go along the lace mountains. Don't need to go along the top or the bottom. The tacking stitches will hold that until we finish it, so we'll take those out at the very end after we've framed it in our hoop. So I'm going to finish those off and then we'll look at putting the position of the lights on. So I've actually got a different sample that I've already got to this next stage, because I just want to show you how well different fabrics work. So some of these fabrics are in the kits as well, and you can just use any colours. Don't worry about whether they match or anything like that. Just 2 pattern pieces go really nicely. And this time I just put the lace over the top of the fabric just to make a different effect rather than making a separate layer. So you can have fun with this and do any combination of fabric that you like. And again, I'm just going to check. My hoop's in the middle. We really want that in the middle, so when we finish it we've got some fabric to stitch around. I'm going to put my lights on, so we need to draw them on, and I've got a few different ways you can do that. So we need something light to mark on something dark. So this is a dressmaker's pencil, so it's basically white chalk in a pencil form. If you're a dressmaker, you'll be familiar with dressmaker's chalk for marking your fabric for you to cut to make your clothes out of. So you can use one of those. If I just draw on the edge, you can see that will lift off. If you put a bit of tape on and rub it, that will lift off if you can see it afterwards. If you've still got a little bit of that showing, it will come off. If you don't have one of those, you can just use a coloured pencil, but use a fairly bright light one, a yellow one or a white one if you've got one. I'm going to have a go with this chalk. So this is a Chaco pen. Now we used these on the ship and I think these are brilliant. So it's chalk in a little pen format. There's a little roller in the end. So this is dressmaker's chalk. This is what you would use to make your clothing with, and it'll come out on the roller. So I'm going to use this one. And I'm going to use this as my example here. Now the lights changed constantly. They just moved all the time and they did every shape going. So really you can do any shape that you want to. There's lots of pictures on the internet if you want some inspiration for what the northern lights look like. This is probably stereotypical how they looked, with these sort of ribbons of light coming down right to the horizon. And they sort of faded out, so they got bigger as they go to the top. So I'm just going to do something like that. And I'm going to draw on with my pen. Now, if you just put the bottom line in, and if you've got this little dip in your mountains, it's really nice to take one right down into the dip. It really gives it that sort of sense of the sky being filled with these lights. And then I'm going to just remove the hoop, and I'm just going to do another line. So that's the bottom line, and I'm going to do the top line. So it's a little bit wider at the top. Don't go too wide with it. I'm going to join them at the bottom. Now again, this will come off if it's not quite happy with where it is. It does lift off really easy, so chalk is a really good way to go to mark these on. If you can't get hold of any pencils, any chalk, you could just tack some lines in and pull those out later. So I'm just going to do a couple more. I'm going to do 3 in there. Let's have one simple one coming in from there like so, and then we'll do a little one going off here like that. Now you'll notice I have taken them. I'm actually going to take that one a bit further. Outside of my hoop, because I want my stitching to go right up to the edge. If they stop a bit short, it looks weird. The lights, they fill the whole sky, they don't just cut off. So I've actually taken them off the edge of the hoop, and we'll move the hoop when we stitch to make sure we do that. So I've taken my lines right off the edge and make sure I stitch up to those. Okay, so we're ready to do the actual lights. I'm actually going to put it in the frame for this because it's much easier to stitch in the frame. So I'm going to frame up and then show you the thread that you can use. So I switched to another sample because I want to show you those combinations again. We just had a sneak peek of this one earlier. So there's my 3 sets of mount. It's got a little bit more mountain-like with these ones there. So again, just to show you how it looks with some different fabrics on there. And I've got some of my lines drawn in, and I've actually started stitching so you can see what it's like. So I found a really good thread to stitch these with is a DMC, and it's colour variations. So anything that's a variegated thread. So if you don't know what a variegated thread is and how to use it, we have a video on that. I'll put that one up the corner. Actually, I'll put it up here for you because sometimes they're difficult to use, but this is a perfect opportunity because there's no shading. I don't have to change colours. It just does it automatically. So this was a really nice one. This is colour 4050, but any variegated thread is nice in a kind of green or green and yellow colour, or you can just change the colours as you go if you want to, if you don't have any of this, but that's what I am going to use because I found that came really well. And I've got 3, no I haven't, I've got two strands of this. So I've just pulled 2 strands out for my skein and I'm using the 2. And the trick with this is, I think, is to do the vertical stitches. The lights kind of, they come in ribbons as they weave through the sky, and everything's kind of is in a vertical pattern, even though the ribbons are curly. Everything sort of comes down, this light comes down like this. So I found if you did vertical stitches, that straight up and down all the way up the shape, regardless of what the shape's doing, that's when it came out really well. So I'm going to start this one down here just to show you how I started it. So just put a knot in the end of your thread, and we're just going to bring that up from the back, and we're going to start right at the bottom, and I'm going to do some really small stitches, so we'll just see if we can zoom in on that a little bit. So just tiny little stitches straight up and down. So if you want to mark on what's vertical, because once you've done one, then that will set the rest of them. So you can mark them on with the whites if you want to do that. Just going to do little stitches at the bottom. I'm going to do each stitch next to the previous stitch. just little short ones. You can go back and fill in if you've got a little bit of a gap, which I have there. Quite like them close together. You can space them out a bit as they go up the ribbon, and then I'm just going to keep them all vertical up that shape, but try and keep the bottom quite smooth. You can see this one here, quite smooth along the bottom edge. Bottom edge is this one. As we go up, when we turn around, this will be the bottom edge here, but I'll explain that when I get there. So just keep filling in that shape, moving up the shape with these vertical stitches next to each other. The colour, if you're using a variegated, will sort itself out. It will shade for you. So when you get up the shape, your stitches will get very long. Don't panic when you get to this sort of vertical point here. It's just going to make our stitches a lot longer. So you can see it's come out there and it's going in there. Just filling in the shape with the vertical stitches, and then when we come back over this shape here, they'll get shorter again. So they will get a little bit longer, a little bit shorter. So don't worry about that. Just fill in the shape. Just going over to that side. Then I'm going to come back over to this side. I'm going to carry on doing that. So right to the top line there from the bottom line. If you want to, you don't have to go round and round. You can come up next to where I came out and go back down. If you find that easier to do, you can swap and do that. So you can see how those stitches are all going from the bottom to the top, not changing the angle of them. And then now we're going the other way, it's a little bit easier. So you will get some long stitches right across this area here, but that's absolutely fine. I'm going to keep doing that all the way up. Now, when you get to the top, you may have to move your frame so you can get your stitches in. So just so I can stitch off the top, I'm just moving my frame underneath. So I've got more of the blue in. Just loosen that off a little bit. And then I'm going to stitch right up here, just off the edge, so that when I reframe it and put my frame back down where it should be, down here, the stitching goes off the edge like it does in the sampler. So just move your frame just so you can finish off that stitching. So I suggest you stitch all of them up to near to the edge, then move your frame and then stitch. Don't keep moving the frame because you will wear the thread if you keep trapping the thread in the edge. So just do it once. So just stitch up to it, move it, stitch, and then you can put your frame back in position. Just going to show you quickly how to finish your thread when you're on the back, so you can change thread. So we've got several layers of fabric, we've got that backing fabric. So if you just go in between the layers with your needle near to where you finished your thread, just check it's not showing on the front, just pull it through and then you can just cut that off, and that's a nice, neat, tidy finish, and you can just start your next one with a knot as we did at the beginning. So you can see I've just spread my stitching out a little bit as it sort of fades out as it goes up into the sky. It's very tense at the bottom, then it just fades out. So I've done that at the edges. I've just reframed the whole thing, so my hoop is now in the correct position. I've done it nice and tightly. Just put your hoop on loosely initially so that you don't damage the stitching, and then tighten this up really tight so that's its final position. And we're going to finish it in the hoop like that. I'm just going to add on a few stars though to the night sky. So just use a very fine cotton for this. You can just use an ordinary white sewing cotton. If you've got something with a bit of sparkle in it, you could use that, have some sparkly stars. But what we actually used on the ship and what's in the kits is this glow-in-the-dark thread. We do have some of this in the shop as we make this video. So you charge this under a light and it actually glows in the dark and the little stars glow. So this is in the packs as well if you buy one of the packs. So I'm going to use this thread just because it's novel and I quite like the idea of the stars glowing. You can see the stars while the lights are doing their thing. I'm just going to do tiny, tiny little crosses for this. Try not to do them nice and evenly all the way through. That's not what the sky looks like. So a little cluster together, make some bigger, make some a little bit smaller. Some of our guests put actual constellations on theirs because we did a lot of navigating from the plough and from the pole star as well. We learned how to find the pole star, so she actually put that on hers, which was really neat. So I'm just going to do a couple of little ones. I'll zoom in so you can see what I'm doing to work the stars. So just one thickness of thread, and make these as small as you can get away with because the stars are really tiny. So just an upright cross, so just an up stitch, upright stitch, little cross over the middle of it, That's quite a big one. That'll have to be the pole star. It's quite hard to do this small and on the camera, so I'm going to try and do a little dinny small one. So really tiny, these ones. You could do a little French knot, I guess, if you wanted a really small one. I've tried that. As I said, don't evenly space them, that's not what the stars do, so a little cluster of them there. That's good. Getting smaller now. As small as you can make these, I would say. Just like so. And then I can just work my way around the piece. I can just jump over here with that and put a little one in there. And then I can just work my way around the piece, because you should only need one thread. You shouldn't need to change your thread. You can change it as we did before if you want to, but if you work around in a methodical order, you should get all your stars in. And then I'll just show you how they look when they're finished. So that's the finished embroidery with my little stars in place around my northern lights. I'm going to finish it off in the frame now. And all I'm going to do is just cut off the corners and make it round. It doesn't have to be exactly round, but I'm just going to snip around like that. Doesn't matter that you're cutting through your stitches, because we're going to sew around this to finish it off, so it doesn't matter if you cut through those tacking stitches, and we'll leave that in place. And then I'm just going to turn it over, and I've got a strong sewing thread because you're going to need to pull this up quite tightly, so you need something a bit stronger. And I'm just going to work a running stitch all the way around, about that distance from the hoop, so then gather it up and it will gather around the hoop like that. So don't go too close to the hoop. You can do fairly large running stitches all the way around like that. And then when you've been all the way round back to the beginning, you can just cut your length of thread, and then when you pull it up, you can gather it in. You pull your two thread ends together and it will gather around the hoop, and then you can just tie those in a double knot. You might need an assistant to help you hold the knots while you do that. So nice and tight around the hoop so that it looks like this. So you can see my running stitch around the edge there, tied off really nice and tightly over here, and you can just finish the ends off inside if you want to. So it's all nice and tight around the hoop and it's not going to fall out. And then all I've done on the back is just put a piece of felt on the back of it. So you can just cut a round piece of felt. So if you just cut to the inside of your small hoop, you can draw around the inside on your felt. That will give you the right size piece of felt for the back, and you can just pin that in place with a couple of pins at the top and the bottom. Try and get it in the middle, try and get it nice and tight across the back. We do have a whole video on how to do this, so I'm just going to do this very quickly. And then you can use your sewing thread. You can either use your embroidery thread that you've used on your project, or you can use that stronger thread, and then you can just stitch around. You can just catch a little bit of the backing and a little bit of the felt and go round and round the back and sew that felt onto the back. And I'll just show you what that looks like on another embroidery that I've got. So we finish like that. So just sewn all the way around the edge. It gives it a nice backing to it, just protects the back a little bit. If you want to hang it on the wall, it gives it just that little bit of extra protection. So worth doing that. That piece of felt is in those kits if you've got one of those. So if you do want to hang it on the wall, you can add a little hanging loop. This is a little piece of satin ribbon, about 40 centimetres or so. Folded it in half. You can just tuck the loop through underneath the screw thread of the frame. Decide how long you want your little loop to be. You can just tie that in a knot around there. So that's the length of your hanging hoop. And then these two ends here you can just tie into a bow. Really simple, just to finish it off and make it ready to hang on the wall. So I hope you're inspired to stitch a little northern lights of your own, or maybe if you're in the southern hemisphere you can stitch the southern lights. Don't forget we've got a few materials packs if you want to have a go at this, available in the shop. Link for those is in the description below. If you want a more detailed video on how to finish embroideries and hoops, you can check that video out up here. Lots more information in that one. If you've enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and I'll see you next time.